Welcome to this demo on what an Express API should look like. Now, this is in no ways a tutorial. I'm not going to teach you how to make an Express API in this video. I just want to show you what the end result would be. That way you know what you're aiming for. Now, one thing here, I recommend using Mongoose to connect to your database. And this is something in JavaScript that they call a promise. And in a promise, we pass the promise a function that it promises to call if the connection goes through. And if you notice, that is setting up my application. Now, the tutorial that you follow should probably have this code. There might be lots of other ways. I've noticed there's tons of different ways to get this API working. You just need to find one and follow it. I, again, do not recommend you just copying my code. One thing that I did want to emphasize is there might be a little confusion because there's two different syntaxes for creating a function. So one is you type the word function and you have your parentheses and open and close curly braces with the function inside. That is totally fine. A little shortcut or a little shorter way of creating a function is removing the word function and then putting this arrow, an equal sign, and a greater than sign. This arrow, and that makes a function as well. So one thing that I wanted to emphasize or point out is that I am using a routes file. So I have a separate file called routes.js that has my code, and that's going to use the Express router, and that also separates your code into separate files. So I recommend instead of having one big file with all of your functions, I recommend separating your application into smaller files, each that has a purpose. Now right now I only have one model, that's why I only have one routes file, but you might want to create other files as you add more models into your application. Now this is my routes file, and you can see I have a Mongoose model file that I import in, and I also use the Express router to create a router. And right here I created one function. This is just for debugging. Sometimes you don't know why your request isn't going through. What this function does right here is it captures any request that comes in, prints out a little error message, and then moves on to find the actual function that request should resolve to. And I also created a little test API function that you can use to test, make sure your API is working. It just passes back a message that says test API is working. That way you know that your server is up and running, and you don't have to try to figure out anything except for something might be wrong with one of your specific functions that you're using. Again, completely optional, and this is not a tutorial trying to teach you how to create an API. This is just showing you a couple things that maybe you could try to include into your API after you got it working, just to add some more debug features for that. And one other thing that I wanted to point out is I am using NodeMon, and notice in my package.json file I have this scripts. The start script uses NodeMon to start my Node.js server. And what that does is it pays attention to my files, and when I make changes and save them, it restarts the server automatically. That's a nice little feature. A lot of times you forget to restart the server, you make a change to your file, you forget to restart the server, you try to test it, nothing changes, and you're wondering why. And you really just forgot to start the server, so NodeMon is in here so that it restarts it. Now you can start your server on the line by saying npm start, and it will look at this and run the NodeMon command. So that way your server restarts every time you change a file. Now when your API is all done, you can test it with two tools, and I'm going to show those to you. The first one is Curl. Now you might have to install Curl on your machine to get it working, but this is a command line tool that you can use to make HTTP requests. And by default, Curl makes a GET request, so you just need to type curl and the name or your URL that you want to get, and this will make a GET request to my test API function, and you can see I'm getting that message back. Now you can also, I also have other endpoints. I have a post model that I can get one, I can get many, I can post, I can create a post, and I can delete a post. So I can do all of the database operations on this post. So I'll show you getting all the posts back. And I'm just, again, using RESTful routes. So I'm just making a GET request to my posts endpoint. And you can see I have some posts that it returns back in an array. So next, let's create a post. And as you know from RESTful routing, to create a post, we make a post request to this endpoint right here, /posts. And for curl to do a post request, first we need to add in the -x option. Now this is just wrapping around. This is one line, but I don't have enough room on one line for everything. So it just wraps around, and the X option, and then you put post, that says what HTTP method you're going to use. And again, I'm still pointing it at the post's URL. The -D is the data that I want to send in the body of the request. And you can see I used a single quote on both sides. That way I can use double quotes inside to format a JSON string that has my data in it. The other thing that's required in the capital H, it stands for headers. We need a header that says our content is JSON content. If we don't have that, the API, well, depending on how you make your API, the API might not be able to understand that you have JSON content, and it would ignore the request or possibly error. So when I do this, hopefully it created a request, and it actually didn't route through the right way because I had used lower case post, but you have to use capital case on your post. And you can see that that did create me a new posts, and I can view that and it's seeing all my posts, and now we see the test content and the test post. So that's how you can use curl. You can also use a put method to do updates and a delete method to delete. But this gets a little tedious to type everything in, so enter Postman. So when you launch up Postman, you might need to create an account and log in to be able to get this to work, but download and install Postman, and now you can make the requests from a user interface, which is a lot easier. So you can decide, and again, there might be a sidebar over here with a little history. You can save these so that you can save your request. That way you can run them, open them up, and run them multiple times. But I got rid of that sidebar so you can focus right here. We're going to make a GET request to this URL, and I can go ahead and click send, and you can see I have all of my posts that I have created. Now let's say that I want to create a post. Well, that's to post to the same URL, but now we're going to need a body. And you notice right now the body says none. You can click raw, and then you might have to select from this side, make sure you select JSON. And then you'll need to type this in. I already typed it in to test this out before, but you'll need to type this in, and you can have a new post and a new content, just anything to test it out. And you can click send, and you can see the response down here that it did in fact go through, and now we have the new post. Now going back, we can see the new post is in there. We can also see one post by copying the ID and putting it on the end of the URL and making a GET request. And we can see just one post. So now we've tested C1 or C many, create one, and then now C1, and now let's update. And an update uses the patch request, so we're going to update this, and we want to make sure we include a body. So click on the body tab and click raw, and now we can try to change the title and the content, and make sure again this says JSON. You can send that request, and down below we see that we got that changed. We can go back and make a GET request to the post URL to see all of them. and we could see all of them, and we could see that we changed that one. Now we want to delete this one, so once again copy that URL, go back up and make a delete request with the ID in there. And now that we're making a delete request, and we don't want to send a body, so make sure you click none on that and you send, and we don't get anything back. That's just the way that I did my API. But if I go back and make a get request on the endpoint, that URL right there, if I go back and make a get request, we can see that that changed content post is no longer there. So that's what you want to do to test out your API. You want to show all of those actions: a view many, view one, create, update, and delete. So make sure that you can do all 5 of those actions. Make sure you're using your RESTful routes for each one.